The Galactic Council voted to kick out humans. Then she smiled. "We made your weapons." The notification arrived at 11:47. It was 4 sentences long. The Terran Compact had been expelled from the Deliberative Council. All 47 delegates had 72 hours to clear their offices, return their session passes, and vacate Convocation Station Keth. The decision had been reached by a vote of 31 to 9. There was no appeal process listed, because under deliberative charter procedure, there was none. Island Kors read the notification twice. Then he set it on his terminal and looked at the wall. He is filing this account because the session record does not contain what the session felt like. He believes both matter. He has been told it will be sealed for 50 years. He is filing it anyway. 47 delegates began packing within the hour. Kors watched the departure logs fill up on his terminal, the small procedural notices that meant someone was clearing a desk, returning a key, handing in a floor pass. He tracked them because it was his job. In 11 years at the Deliberative Registry, he had countersigned 4,400 session records. He had filed more departure notices than he could count. He knew what a species leaving looked like in the system. A sequence of small closures, each one ordinary, the shape of an exit visible only when you watched all of them at once. By 13:00, 39 of the 47 Terran delegates had filed their first departure actions. 8 had not. By 13:45, 7 of those 8 had caught up. 1 had not. Kors pulled up the staff movement log and found her. Saren Vey Loreth, Senior Preservation Officer, Terran Compact Archival Division. She had badged into Preservation Annex Velath Cross at 12:14, Sublevel 3, the Deep Archive. She had not badged out. Kors had worked alongside Saren for 11 years without working with her directly. The Archival Division and the Deliberative Registry shared a floor but not a function. He had seen her eat lunch at the same terminal every day for 11 years. He had seen her use the same registry code cadence, 4 digits, pause, 3, every time she accessed a sealed file. He had seen her leave at the same hour, file at the same hour, arrive at the same hour without variation, across more than 4,000 working days. She had never once been late to file a record. She had never once filed one early. He stood up from his terminal, picked up his stylus and his session folio, and went down to Sublevel 3. The lift opened into amber light. The annex ran warmer than the upper floors. The thermal cycling system that kept the oldest documents stable pushed heat into the corridor in slow, even pulses. The air was slightly denser here. It had a faint smell, the kind old fabrication materials develop over decades, composite and dry warmth, nothing sharp. Kors pressed his stylus against the inside of his left wrist as he walked. 3 small taps, a habit he'd had since his first year in the registry, when session records started meaning something to him beyond procedure. He found her at the far end of the annex. In front of a cold hold unit, he had passed 4 times in 11 years without stopping. She was entering a registry code, 4 digits, pause, 3. The lock took a full 3 seconds to disengage. He heard it, a low sequential click, each pin releasing separately, the last one louder than the others. She opened the unit, reached inside, lifted out a composite archival case. Kors had filed the cold hold receipt for that case 4 times. Once when it came in, once at the 5-year review, once at the 20-year, once at the 30. Each time the receipt listed the same information. 1 composite archival case, 2196 standard fabrication, contents sealed, access restricted to filing archivist. Weight, 340 grams. He had never looked at what was in it. He had never asked. Neither, as far as the log showed, had anyone else. The case was the wrong color. Standard 2196 fabrication composite was gray, a particular flat gray, uniform, that Kors could have identified in a dark room. This case was amber-tinted, a warm discoloration that ran deepest at the lower right corner where the material had worn thin. 151 years of thermal cycling changed the composite. He had not known that. He looked at the color and understood he was looking at the age of it, the way you look at the rings inside a cut tree and understand years you were not there for. She was wearing formal gray, not working gray. He had never seen her in formal gray. Kors stood in the doorway. Saren turned, looked at him for a moment, then looked back at the case. She lifted it the way you lift something you have been waiting to set down for 31 years. Not carefully, deliberately. "Are you logging today's movements?" she said. "Yes," he said. She walked past him toward the lift. He followed. He did not know then why he followed. He knows now. His counter-signature was required to close any session record she opened. She had not needed to ask him. The procedure had already asked him, 31 years before she walked into Convocation Hall Keth, the moment they assigned him to the deliberative registry. The lift opened into amber light again, Corridor Keth 9, the route from Sublevel 3 to the Convocation Hall. No windows. The amber lighting was a standard Alun comfort calibration, adjusted for their visual range. Kors had walked this corridor more times than he could count. He had always found it slightly too warm, slightly too closed. Saren walked at her usual pace. The case swung at her side. She did not hold it against her body. She did not adjust her grip. She carried it the way she carried her session folio, as a thing that belonged to her and was going where she was going and required no further management. Kors pressed his stylus to his wrist, 3 taps, then 3 more. Her formal gray had no registry badge on it. The working gray had one, a small laminated tag on the left breast, the kind every archival division staff member wore in session areas. He had not noticed until now. 3 steps behind her in a corridor lit the color of old documents, that she had removed it. He filed that detail in the part of his mind where he kept things he didn't know the meaning of yet. Checkpoint 1 was a standard Alun security post, 2 guards, amber-banded uniforms, a panel that read exemption codes. Kors presented his registry clearance first, as protocol required. Then Saren held out the case's side panel. The institutional exemption code for the archival division was old enough that the guards had probably never had cause to reject it. The exemption predated the current council formation. It was filed when the archive and the deliberative were established as partner institutions, before the Alun Compact had a formal governance cast, before there was a convener's bench to put anything on. The guard read the code, waved them through. Checkpoint 2 repeated the same sequence. Kors clearance, the exemption code, the wave-through. Checkpoint 3 was different. The guard at Checkpoint 3 was younger. He read the exemption code, confirmed it, and then looked at the case. Not at Saren, at the case. His hand moved not far, not a reach, just a small shift of weight toward it and then stopped. He looked at Kors. Kors held his session folio open at the current page and looked back. The guard waved them through. Kors did not record the hand movement in his session folio. He did not know what it meant. He recorded only what he could verify. Institutional exemption confirmed at all 3 checkpoints. Both registry staff cleared. Entry to Convocation Hall corridor authorized at 14:33. In the personal account, he recorded the hand. Kors had been in Convocation Hall Keth many times. He had countersigned records there, sat in the registry section, the narrow bench along the left wall reserved for institutional witnesses, and logged proceedings he was not participating in. He knew the hall's particular quality. The voices came back slightly smaller than they left. A 4% acoustic return loss, engineered, filed as comfort calibration. He had read the original specification once, years ago, while looking for something else. It was an Alun design choice. The rationale in the filing was a single line. Voices carry at the correct register for a deliberative environment. He had always understood this to mean voices sound like they need the council's permission to fill the room. Saren walked in during a tariff debate. She did not wait for a pause. She walked to the convener's bench, set the case on the surface, and placed both hands flat on the bench, left over right, slight forward lean. The tariff debate stopped mid-sentence. Grand Convener Druathvel was 2 meters and 30 centimeters of Alun governance cast, amber-banded exoskeleton, 4 lateral eyes with nictitating membranes cores, had seen close under pressure more times than he wished. The convener's left armrest carried 9,200 thin parallel cuts, 1 for each session he had closed. Beside him, a matte black citation rod, engraved with each quorum he had called. Drew Uthvel looked at Saren. From behind his exoskeletal banding, a low sound began, the subvocal resonance hum that Kors knew meant a ruling was forming. Drew Uthvel did it before every formal statement, the way some people draw breath. "You are unscheduled," Drew Uthvel said. "You hold no seat. This council has reached its decision." Saren said, "I am requesting 11 minutes. No argument, no appeal, no elaboration." The resonance hum continued for 4 seconds after she stopped speaking. Then it stopped. Drew Uthvel granted the 11 minutes, and Kors, standing at the registry bench with his stylus already in hand, understood the calculation the convener had just made. Refusing her request required a formal motion. A formal motion required the record to show that the convener had received a request and considered it. Drew Uthvel did not want that in the record. A senior Terran archivist, on the day of the expulsion, requesting the floor and being denied. He granted 11 minutes to protect the record from showing he had been asked. He had just opened the record instead. Saren opened the case. She placed both hands inside, lifted out a document, and set it on the convener's bench. The paper was old, not degraded, preserved, the way a properly sealed archive preserves things, but old in the way that showed in the weight and color of it. Kors could see the date from where he stood. She set it down and did not explain what it was. She carried it for 31 years. What she did with it in 11 minutes stay close. That morning had begun the way the last 4,018 mornings Kors had spent at the deliberative registry had begun. Terminal on, session log open, the day's record queue sorted by urgency. The notification had arrived at 11:47. He had read it twice. He had set it down. He had watched the departure log fill in. He had noticed the one name that wasn't filling in. He had gone down to sub-level 3 because a senior archivist on expulsion day, not packing, not filing, not in her office. That was the kind of thing a registry officer was supposed to notice. He had not expected the case. He had not expected to be in this hall. 14 minutes later, watching a document dated 2174 sit on the convener's bench in a session that had not been scheduled, while 47 Terran delegates packed their offices 3 floors above, and the whole deliberative structure continued procedurally to function as designed. The Grand Convener had presided over 9,200 sessions. He had the count on his armrest. He had the quorums on his rod. Kors had filed records for 40 of those sessions, sitting in this same bench, and he had always thought the rod was the most significant object in the room. The thing that signaled the decision had been made and would not change. Drew Uthvel had not touched it since the document went down on his bench. The hall's tariff delegates had gone quiet. The Vithrani arbiter on the right side of the deliberative arc was watching the document with what Kors recognized as the Vithrani tell for careful attention, both secondary eyelids half-closed, head fractionally lowered. The Farathi observer in the economic tier had not moved since Saren placed the first document. Lateral eyelid, closed. Saren reached into the case. She lifted out a second document, set it beside the first, reached in again. The case was not large. From where Kors sat, he could see the edge of what was inside stacked flat, even the way you stack things you have handled many times without needing to look at the order. She had not needed to organize them before she came. They were already organized. They had been organized for 31 years. Kors pressed his stylus to his wrist, 3 taps, then 3 more. He stopped mid-7th and held the stylus flat against his skin. He had filed the cold hold receipt for that case 4 times in 11 years. He had walked past the unit in sub-level 3 once a week, every week, for 11 years, and he had never once opened it or asked what was in it. He was beginning to understand that this was not an accident. Saren placed a third document, a fourth. She read each date aloud as she set it down. The dates were not recent. 2174, she said, 2181, 2193, 2201. She placed a fifth, 2214. The documents were accruing on the convener's bench in a row. The bench was long, designed for the convener's full arm span, which in Drew Uthvel's case was considerable. The documents were covering it. Drew Uthvel was reading. His exoskeletal banding had begun to shift, not dramatically, the kind of change you missed if you didn't know what to look for. The amber was deepening, moving toward ochre at the upper thorax. Kors knew that shift. He had seen it twice in 11 years of registry work, both times when a procedural challenge had reached the convener's bench. Ochre meant cognitive pressure. Ochre meant the hum was going to get louder before any ruling was issued. The hum had not gotten louder. It had gotten quieter. These documents, Saren said, span 151 years. The oldest is dated 2174. The newest is dated 2281. She placed the last of the stack. 12 documents so far, Kors counted, and looked at Drew Uthvel. Every one of them predates the Deliberative Council's formal recognition of the Terran Compact as a treaty species. By at least a decade, we were building your fleet before you decided we were a species worth speaking to. The hall was quiet enough that Kors could hear his own heartbeat. The Vithrani arbiter's secondary eyelids had closed fully. The Farathi observer had not opened his lateral eyelid. The Alun secondary delegate on the left side of the arc was sitting very still. Drew Uthvel looked at the documents. He looked at them the way you look at something you thought you knew the shape of, and are now discovering has more to it than the surface showed. He did not speak. Saren reached into the case. There were more. She began again with the dates. 2237, 2244, 2256. She placed each document as she read its date, the same deliberate weight, the same even pace. No urgency, no performance. Kors had the impression of someone finishing a task that had always been going to end this way, and knowing it, and not needing anyone else to know it yet. 311 military-grade drive systems, she said. 44 propulsion arrays. 19 FTL relay architectures. Everyone bears a Terran co-signature. Everyone is currently active in an Alun compact fleet vessel. The Alun secondary delegate stood up. The authenticity of these documents, he began. Saren did not look at him. She turned to the Vithrani arbiter. The counter-signatures on those documents are Vithrani convocation marks, she said. Check your own registry. The secondary delegate stopped speaking. The Vithrani arbiter turned to his terminal. His secondary eyelids were fully closed. His hands moved across the input surface with the careful speed of someone who already knows what they are going to find, but needs the record to show they looked. 40 seconds. The arbiter looked up. Confirmed, he said. 2 syllables, nothing else. The secondary delegate sat down. He did not speak again. Kors looked at his stylus. His hand had stopped pressing it to his wrist. He didn't know when that had happened. He was holding it flat in his palm, the way you hold something you might need to use very soon. The case was not empty. Saren's hand went back inside. She lifted out another document. This one looked different. Not older, the same preservation quality as the rest, but the format was different. Not a co-authorship agreement, not a technical filing, something else. Kors had been in this registry long enough to recognize an archival notice by its format. It was a maintenance dependency declaration. He did not know yet what that meant for the session. He knew what it meant in the charter. He had filed 3 of them in 11 years, for 2 minor technical systems and 1 navigational database. A maintenance dependency declaration, properly filed, constituted a formal record of one party's structural reliance on another party's technical contribution. Under the charter, it triggered a review requirement before any treaty action affecting the declaring party could be finalized. Under Article 9, Clause 4 specifically, his stylus was still flat in his palm. Saren set the document on the bench. This was filed 17 years ago, she said. Standard archival protocol. Maintenance dependency declaration on all 311 active systems bearing Terran co-signatures. She looked at Drew Uthvel. Your counsel countersigned it. She picked up the document and turned it over. Twice, she said. The second signature is dated 4 years after you began planning this expulsion. You signed it anyway. Drew Uthvel's exoskeletal banding was fully ochre. His citation rod was still beside him. He had not touched it. Kors did not write what happened next in the session record first. He wrote it in his personal account first, because he wanted the language to be exactly right before it entered the official log. And he knew, in a way he had not known 11 minutes ago, not even 30 seconds ago, that the language was going to matter. He wrote, "The resonance hum has gone lower than I have heard it go in 11 years. It is not gone, but it is close." Then he copied the observation into the session record and went back to watching. Saren reached into the case one more time. Kors had counted 29 documents on the convener's bench. He thought she was done. He had begun to form a picture of what came next. Druethvel calling a recess, the session record closing, the question of what Article 9 actually required going to a procedural subcommittee that would take 6 months to convene. He had begun, in the back of his mind, to calculate whether 6 months was enough time for the Terran delegation to delay its departure. She pulled out a document that was not a co-authorship agreement. Kors had seen the format already. He recognized it from the one she had placed on the bench 30 seconds ago. Another maintenance dependency notice. This one had a different date. She set it beside the first. "This is the countersignature," she said. "First submission 2308. The council signed here," she pointed. Then she turned the page. "Second submission 2312. The council signed here." She looked at Druethvel. 2312 is 4 years after the internal motion to begin expulsion proceedings was first filed in the Alun Compact governance log. I have a copy of that motion as well, if the Vithrani arbiter would like to confirm the date. The Vithrani arbiter did not respond. He was already checking. Kors looked at the document. He looked at the 2 countersignatures, 2 separate Alun governance seals, 4 years apart. He thought about what it meant to sign a maintenance dependency declaration while simultaneously planning the departure of the party you were declaring dependency on. He thought about what it meant to do that twice. He pressed his stylus to his wrist. He stopped before the first tab. "Article 9, Clause 4 of the Deliberative Charter," Saren said. Her voice in the hall came back 4% smaller than it left her, the way all voices did. It did not sound small. "No expulsion of a party holding an active maintenance dependency declaration may proceed until the dependency is formally resolved or the declaring party releases the maintenance notice." She set the document down. "I have not released the notice. I do not intend to." Druethvel's resonance hum was so low now that Kors could feel it more than hear it, a pressure at the back of his jaw, rather than a sound. The Alun secondary delegate turned to speak. Druethvel raised one hand, and the delegate stopped. The Farathi observer's lateral eyelid closed. Kors watched Druethvel look at the documents on his bench. All 29 of them, plus the 2 maintenance filings, spread across the surface in a row. 31 documents, 151 years. The bench was designed for the convener's arm span. The documents covered most of it now. Druethvel picked up his citation rod. Kors straightened in his seat. In 9 years of filing records in this hall, he had seen the rod come up at the start of a formal ruling, at the call of a vote, and at the close of a session. He had never seen it come up in a moment like this. "This session is recessed," Druethvel said. Saren did not move. "The record is open," she said. She looked at Kors. "Not a request, information." Kors understood what she was telling him before she finished the sentence. An open session record required a countersignature from the embedded institutional witness before it could close. That was him. Without his countersignature, the record stayed open. A recess session inside an open record was a procedural impossibility under the Charter. A session could only recess after its record was certified complete. And a record could not be certified complete without the institutional witness's signature. No closed record. No recess. No recess meant the session stayed active. An active session meant Druethvel could not leave the floor without the record showing an incomplete proceeding. And an expulsion could not be processed, could not advance one procedural step, while an active maintenance dependency declaration sat in the open record of an unclosed session. The door had no handle. Druethvel looked at Kors. Not at Saren, at Kors. Kors had been at this bench for 11 years. He had countersigned 4,400 records. He had always understood his function as the thing that closed the loop, the last signature that turned a session into official history. He had never thought of it as the thing that kept a loop open. He had never needed to. His stylus was in his hand. The Farathi observer leaned slightly toward the delegate beside him. Kors caught the movement in his peripheral vision, not a lean of surprise, a lean of recalculation. The Farathi were not surprised by what was happening. They were adjusting. He did not know what they were adjusting toward. He filed it. HFY set the citation rod down on the bench. Kors wrote it in his personal account first, then in the session record, because he wanted the language exact. The citation rod has been placed on the bench surface. In 9,200 sessions, this has not occurred prior to session close. He looked up from the record and back at the bench. Saren had not moved, both hands flat on the surface, left over right, the slight forward lean. She was looking at the space above HFY's head, not at him, past him. Kors had seen that expression before in 31 years of filing. It was the expression of someone who had finished something and was waiting for the room to catch up. HFY looked at the 31 documents spread across his bench. The Vithrani arbiter's secondary eyelids were both fully closed. The Farathi observer's lateral eyelid had not reopened. The Alun's secondary delegate was sitting very still with his hands flat on his own bench. A mirroring, Kors noted, that the delegate probably did not realize he was doing. The resonance hum was gone. Not low, gone. Kors wrote it down. He wrote it in the session record and in the personal account at the same time, because he wanted both documents to show the sequence exactly. The rod went down, and then the hum stopped, and the decision happened in the body before it happened in the procedure, and he had been in the room for both. That was the second time he used the device. He had one left, and he decided then to spend it here on this. Kors' stylus was running low. He had not checked it before the session. He always checked before a session, every session, 4,400 times without exception. He had not checked today because today had not started as a session. He pressed the tip against the pad. The ink was thin, but it wrote. He looked at HFY. HFY said, "The record," Kors said, "is open and requires countersignature from the embedded Terran archivist to close." The convener did not ask whether Kors would sign. Kors could see from the angle of HFY's eyes, all four of them, lateral and forward, that the convener already knew. The stylus was already moving. The rod was down. The hum was gone. The case was empty. Kors signed. The record closed in 14 seconds. What it contained could not be amended after closing. Kors knew this the way he knew his own name, not as a rule, but as the basic physics of his work. A closed record was permanent. It was the only thing in the deliberative structure he had ever thought of as truly permanent. The session log showed 2 lines. Active Maintenance Dependency Declaration under Article 9, Clause 4 confirmed in session record. Expulsion Notification. Processing suspended pending formal resolution. 2 lines. 151 years. Saren closed the case. She picked it up. Then she set it back down on the bench and took her hands off it. She stood back. There were 2 documents still inside it. Kors had seen her reach in after she placed the 31st, checked the inside, and closed the lid. He did not know what those 2 documents were. He did not ask. He filed it, case closed with contents. 2 documents not entered into record. Nature unknown. He looked at the closed lid. He did not open it. HFY looked at the bench for a long time. Then he looked at the session record, which Kors had just closed, and which showed what it showed and could not be changed. Then he looked at the Vithrani arbiter. "I move to suspend the expulsion notification," he said, "pending formal review of the Active Maintenance Dependency Declaration under Article 9. His voice in the hall came back 4% smaller than it left him. The motion required a second. The Vithrani arbiter's hand came up, not out of sympathy. Kors knew. The arbiter was bound by charter to certify what the record showed, and the record showed an active Article 9 filing that the expulsion notification could not move past. The arbiter seconded the motion because the charter had already seconded it. The Farathi observer's left hand moved to a small panel on the arm of his chair. Kors did not know what that panel controlled. He saw the movement and filed it. The motion carried. The suspension notice reached the 47 Terran delegates at 1522. Most of them stopped packing. 3 did not. Kors recorded their names in the session log because the record should show who acted on a decision before it was confirmed and who waited for certainty. He did not editorialize. He wrote the names and the times and the actions, packed, signed departure notice, returned floor pass, and left it in the record for whoever read it 50 years from now to make of it what they would. He thought about the 3 for a moment. He understood them. He was not sure he would have done differently if he had been one of the 47. If he had spent 11 years in an office and been told that office was closing. If he had not known, because there was no reason to know, that one of his colleagues had spent 31 years in a sub-level archive holding a case that weighed 340 grams and changed the shape of the room. He closed the record entry and picked up his folio. He found her in corridor Keth 9 on the way back. She was walking at her usual pace. The same pace she had walked at coming in. The amber light was the same. The corridor was the same, no windows, warm, slightly denser air. The same quiet that made the upper floors feel, by comparison, like they had too much space in them. She was not carrying anything. Kors fell into step beside her. He walked 11 steps without speaking. He counted them because it was the kind of thing he counted. Then he said, "How long?" Saren walked 2 more steps. "The first co-authorship agreement was filed before my grandmother was born," she said. "I have been carrying the case for 31 years. She carried it for 20 before that." Kors did not ask anything else. They walked the rest of the corridor without speaking. The amber light moved across the composite floor in even bands. At the lift, she pressed the call button and they waited, and the lift came, and they got in, and she pressed the floor for her level and he pressed the floor for his, and the lift went up. He did not look at her in the lift. He looked at the floor indicator. The Farathi observer had filed 3 informal consultation requests with allied delegations before the session ended. Kors did not know the content of those consultations. He knew the timeline, 3 requests, 40 minutes, all filed within the session window. He recorded the requests in the session log because they were on record. He recorded them in the personal account because he thought they would matter later, and he wanted to have noted them when they were still new. The Alun secondary delegate filed a formal procedural query about the scope of Article 9, Clause 4, at 16:04. It was routed to the Charter Review Subcommittee. Standard timeline for that subcommittee was 8 to 14 months. The Maintenance Dependency Declaration remained active. The expulsion notification remained suspended. The 47 Terran delegates who had stopped unpacking were, at 17:00, confirmed in their offices for the following session day. The 3 who had not stopped were still not confirmed. Kors noted this without conclusion. The record was not a place for conclusions. He went back to Convocation Hall Urinketh at 18:30, after the floor had cleared. He told himself he was checking the session log for a filing he had missed, a procedural detail he needed to confirm before the daily archive closed. This was not true, and he knew it was not true, but he told himself anyway, because he needed a reason that would fit inside his job description. The hall was empty. The ambient resonance of it, the 4% acoustic return loss, made his footsteps sound slightly smaller than they were. He walked to the convener's bench. The case was still there. She had left it. He stood in front of it for a moment. The amber tint of the composite was more visible in the hall's lighting than it had been in the annex. The hall ran cooler than sub-level 3, and the contrast made the warmth of the old material stand out. The lower right corner was worn thin. The lock panel was closed. The 7-digit code was still set to whatever position it had been in when she opened it that morning. He did not touch it. He turned and walked back to the lift. He filed his personal account that night. All of it, the morning, the corridor, the hall, the 40 seconds the Farathi observer held his eyelid closed, the moment the rod went down, the moment the hum stopped, the 14 seconds the record took to close. He wrote it the way he wrote session records: sequence, observation, confirmed fact. He did not write what it meant. The account was not a place for meaning, any more than the session record was a place for conclusions. He wrote what he saw. At the end, in the margin, he wrote one line, She left the case on the bench. It was empty. She had been carrying it for 31 years. It took 11 minutes to empty it. He sealed the account. He filed it under Deliberative Session 9201, Personal Record Restricted, 50 years. The case sat on the convener's bench. It was empty. Everything it had held was now in the record. It had done what it was made for.